When I was a juror at the juried art salon with Gary Michael Dolt, who intimidated all of us, but he has very good taste. Anyway, the person whose work he liked the best was Rose's. He was like blown away, and he said, "Who is this woman?" Right? And I tried to explain, but anyway. So you all know that Rose is an excellent artist herself. But maybe you don't know that earlier in her career she landed what she calls an ideal teaching job at an alternative school in Toronto, where she taught the likes of Peter Doig. Anyway, she left Toronto in teaching in 1980 and moved to Kingston to live, as she says, more simply and with a life that required less money, in order to discover what she wanted to do with her painting. Tonight we will see the results of that labor.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. Just another thank you, and that is to Jane, who just introduced me, because the art talks were Jane's idea.
And Sharon.
And Sharon. And we have been really enjoying the talks in the past few years. However, I have to confess that I was adamant that I was not going to be doing this talk. And as a matter of fact, when she initially asked me to, I said, hell no. And then, you know, she has this very, very subtle, persuasive quality. And so I succumbed. And here I am. Anyway, thanks for your patience. So I've kind of organized this talk in the following way. And that is that I'm going to talk a little bit about painters that I've liked and that, you know, I've thought about, and some who have influenced what I do. And then I'll show you kind of periods of work that I did. Predominantly, you know, I mean, initially when I first started painting, I was recording pretty much what I saw, albeit not photographically, but rather, you know, selectively and with a very, very keen interest in color and so on. And you know, interwoven through all of that, I was also doing landscapes outdoors. As well, constantly returning to abstraction, total abstraction, and that seems to me to be my overwhelming interest in recent years. The mystery of that, and making abstract art, because amongst so many paintings that I have enjoyed over the years, abstraction has really, my experience looking at it, that whatever I have received from it has continued to echo for me. So, Mika, can you show the Jewish Bride? The one that actually says #1. See, they're not very well organized either. Okay, so I chose this because, as I remember it, this is one of the first paintings that I actually saw, you know, in a museum. And I was enormously moved by it. And at the same time, I saw Rembrandt's, you know, the series of self-images that he made, and was very, very moved by that too. And it was then that I decided I wanted to do that. I wanted to do that, and I wanted to make people feel what I felt in response to this painting. So it was the Jewish Bride, you know, the tenderness of it. And yeah, so you know, this is frequently, I think for all of us, the experience when you're looking at art that you are moved by it. Something familiar to all of us that is triggered by the looking. So next, please. So, in contrast, and this of course is some years later, I was very, very influenced by abstract expressionism, and I mean, I use the example of William de Kooning because, in fact, I found it difficult to download images. Now, of course, now you understand why. However, a lot of it copyright. So, you know, I wasn't able to get exactly the images that I wanted to download, but abstract expressionists, not only de Kooning, but someone who I absolutely love, who I didn't get wasn't able to get an image of, Stewart. You know, where the mark making itself and the way that, you know, the paint is put on the surface, it, you know, carries weight and carries a feeling to the viewer. So I very much became interested in that. And next, please. Well, who doesn't? Yeah. So this is a Matisse, and you know, who in this century or last has not been influenced by him? And you know, not only the way he selected what he was looking at, and then rendered it on a flat surface, but also the colors, the intense colors. And you'll see in some of my early work, it's very, very colorful. Influenced in part by Pierre and my joy in looking at his work. Next, please. So, for me, this is painting as poetry. I was fortunate enough to see a large exhibition of his work a number of years ago. So this is a man who, as a lot of you know, his subject matter was the same over and over and over for his entire life. Bottles and vessels. And they were composed differently. Always very, very quiet colors. Beautiful for me. Diebenkorn. So again, it was that sort of the texture, you know, the texture of the work and the way he composed it, and yeah, primarily that, you know, very, very painterly. There was many years ago when I was still teaching in Toronto, there was a show of his at the Albright Knox gallery, and I was constantly taking kids to see this show over and over again. I must have seen it half a dozen times myself. So, and another influence, Bonnard, and you'll see this particularly because, you know, the first large body of work that I have is composed with kind of an inside-outside view, looking through a window, and that is a theme that reoccurs through art history. But I have loved looking at Pierre Bonnard's work too, not only for the color but also for the pattern, and you know, the paintings almost kind of pulse with color and touch. Next, please. And so, this may be a lesser known artist, an Israeli artist whose last name is Arika. He just died a couple of years ago. He does the most exquisite drawings of his environment. And again, you know, anything can be the subject. You know, I've always said that to people in classes and so on. It doesn't really matter what you're painting; it's how you treat it, how you arrange it, how you see it, and Yeah. And this is also Erika's work. Just beautiful, just a kind of a glimpse, and like abstract and yet recognizable is that sort of combination. Yes, thank you. And oh yeah, and I may add David Hockney's drawings, who I looked at a lot, I have to say, over the years, and this is not the best example. He did very, very beautiful line drawings, ink on paper. And his, what I learned from him was his capacity to use line and a variety of really, really small marks that defined a lot, said a lot. So it was simple means to say a lot. Next, please.
That's the last one.
Okay, so sorry. Now we have to break for the next, and a lot, most of it, not all, but most of them are done on just north of Kingston. I discovered this area that I thought was, and continue to think as really, really beautiful. So. Always completed, you know, going, kind of wandering around, even driving around and seeing, always looking for a location that I really, really found interesting. And then I would stop and set up and always do the painting, would stop when I was finished. So they were always done on location. They're not large. I mean, this makes it look expansive, but in fact, you know, they're about that size. Okay, next. So I'll just, we can just go through them. I spent a summer in Halifax doing that, just exactly that, you know, kind of driving out to the little ports and painting. So you can see, the color is very, very different. The light is different there. It tends to be a little bit foggy. So,
Are these acrylics?
no, everything, no. You know, I've worked, I've tried acrylics that just don't suit me. Really like oil. So just, Mika, we can just show all of them. I'm not going to talk about each one, but just to give you kind of a sense.
What size are they?
They're not large. They're not huge. So, you know, I think in general, I can say that I work, you know, when I paint images that are recognizable, I'm not really interested in high definition. Kind of just more of an impression, and I select the colors that I want to use in advance, so I'm kind of restricting my palette. So we'll just, I don't think there are many of those. Well, that probably preceded what you just said, just saw. Yeah, and these are very early. They're actually earlier than what you just saw, so they were, you know, I was using more color then, and I wasn't being as restrictive with myself as I became. So just, we'll just finish that roll off then. I decided that I was going to paint, you know, sometimes setting something up in front of a window and painting it, and sometimes just painting what I found there, including what I saw through the window. So it was this kind of combination of interior and exterior landscape view. And arbitrary use of color. And what else can I say about them? And just very, very early.
Matisse.
Matisse.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, you know, I showed you my influences.
And there's a Van Gogh in the background?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, all right, I know, it's a mess. You know, this is one of the last ones. It's interesting that the window disappears.
Mm.
So, you know, it's like the inside and becomes the outside.
And then you're sort of done with that?
Well, then I think I then started doing or around the same time, the night paintings. Oh, that ghostly image is me.
So do you think up your colors before you even start painting?
Yeah, usually I do.
Mix them up.
Yeah, usually I kind of decide what I'm going to use beforehand.
So is that so that you can mix colors up?
Yes, yes.
And so do you limit yourself to the number of these colors, or
And so,
like?
well, you know
Kind of.
what? As time has gone on, I've limited them more than I
Yeah.
did initially.
Yeah.
But some limitation I think is good because you know you just can you can get so much more in fact when you do impose a limitation. So yeah, I know.
This one is good.
So you can see the, you know, the Benar influence and so on. So, you know what? This is the first of what I call the contingency series, and I call it that because it refers to the kind of accidental, random things that can occur when you're, you know, working in art. And this whole series was preceded by a dry spell, like absolutely having no idea what I was going to be doing. And I then resorted to, well, I noticed a big pile of old drawings in my studio, quite a big pile. And I just kind of started looking through those, you know, for something to do. I started then seeing parts of drawings that I really quite liked, not necessarily the entire drawing. So I tore or I cut. I started cutting pieces of old drawings and so on that I liked, and then composed them, you know, and that kind of got the ball rolling for me again. And yeah, that ball is still rolling, I have to say. However, I mean, sometimes faster than other times. So the first ones were exclusively kind of collage, you know, and made up of selections from old drawings and so on. But the more recent ones have often start as collages but include paint as well. So it's kind of a return to paint. And just before we look at these, yeah, it's you know, it's kind of curious to me that I ended up, you know, doing the collages because I've always loved the, you know, the texture and the feel of paint. I like mixing it, putting it on. I respond to it when I see it in a painting and so on. Anyway, so that's contingency number one, and then you know you can make a could just go through them and
So
you can
just
have
want
an
to, just whatever order they come up
Yeah,
and down?
you know, what else can I say at this point? So,
So are these all old drawings or that you're using, or are you?
well, okay, so then I also added, I do like to draw, and so I would do kind of rough sketches, abstract sketches and so on, but I then started including in the collages as well. Well, these are really out of order because this is a more recent one. Yeah.
Tell us which ones are older and which ones are more recent.
Yeah, well, yes, so the one you just saw, the really abstract,
Yeah.
well, they're all abstract, what am I saying? But that's really very recent. And the other, this is kind of middle period, I would say. And I think I did 2 versions of this. There may, somewhere we may come upon it. I mean, originally I had to organize them, I really did.
That is more recent, huh?
Yes, so this is fairly, that was done certainly in the last year. Yeah, so they have changed.
So they're becoming more painterly then?
Yeah, I'm getting back, yes, that's a good way to put it, yeah. As I said, I'm starting to paint on top of the collage.
Yes. Is this?
Where does this come in, Rose?
I'm sorry?
Where does this come in terms of your
Well,
eras?
I'd say, trying to remember. At one point, again, one of those dry spells, I think that I had the idea that I was going to, and I think that's what happened here, I think that I decided that I was going to paint or draw something, a collage that I'd already made. So I think this is that. That doesn't even exist anymore. I have to say, that's morphed into something completely different. Anyway, so persistent. And this is very, very recent, by the way. Yeah, these are really extremely recent. So, a fair amount of paint in that one you just saw. Fairly recent. Kind of middle.
So how big are these?
So, what are they? I think they're about, 28 by 32 maybe, something like that, 34.
Are drawn to mark making. And I noticed that with some of the type of marks that you make, they almost have a non-dominant hand look to them. Do you do that at all? Like if you're right-handed, use your left?
Oh, I see.
No, but that's just, you just do it.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't with any of these for sure. But that's an interesting comment.
There's different personalities to the different marks that you make.
Right.
Some are very controlled.
Different days.
Yeah, and some have a lot of emotion in them, some are jerky and
Yes, sure.
lovely contrasts.
Are there any others?
Well, I'll just go through the sequence. And then-
Oh, sure, yeah.
I guess that's it.
Okay, well, I think that's a good.
Yeah.
Unless there's any particular one you really
No,
want to show
you know,
us.
That's it. So, what else can I say? I think the paintings that have mattered most to me in terms of someone who loves to look at them is, when they are usually kind of a lyrical expression of the individual, and they sometimes will also how to say this, also make their comment on almost the human condition. So it's never, I mean, we who express ourselves visually use the tools that we have in hand, and that is, lines and shapes and colors and so on, and we are, moving them around and coercing them and nudging them into place here and there. And what we all want to do is express ourselves to the best of our ability. Yeah, so I don't know. Ask me a question.